Hi, everybody. My name is Madison Hinkledyer, and today we're going to be discussing coaching, disciplining, and terminating staff. Little introduction before we get started is that all of these are components of very successful managers and management. In order to be able to effectively coach your employees, you also need to be a very effective coach yourself, and you need to be able to receive coaching effectively. Another one is that you need to be able to provide effective discipline. You need to be very consistent with it and across the board with all of the employees. Another one is compassion determination. It is a very sticky situation to terminate an employee, so through that you need to be able to be compassionate of them as a person, but yet being very stern and firm because of course it is a very challenging situation and you don't want to seem as though you're not quite sure as to what the situation is. You need to be able to provide backup information for it and make sure that your supervisors are on board with you. So we're going to start with coaching. Definition here is that it collaborates relationship that supports continuing personal, professional, and career development. It is an interactive and very interpersonal relationship that you have with your employees. It allows you to be able to assist them in focusing on achieving their goals. It allows you to have effective discussions with them, and you are then able to, individualize your coaching so that that individual employee can reap the best benefits from it. Sullivan in 2017 discussed coach's skill, and it's very, very important. It facilitates meaningful conversations, and it also lets the nurse or another employee grow, depending on what situation you have. But effective coaching does actually improve quality of work life. It's been proven to create a supportive company culture because individuals don't feel as though that they are, not being helped in achieving their goals. Their coach, their manager or whoever higher up is actually able to help them, improve themselves, improve their work life, and, pursue career development. And by having a manager that is supportive of you, you feel much more supported by your team and you feel like you're able to actually accomplish more, which every employee wants to experience. Sullivan discussed a list for effective coaching. In order to receive coaching, that individual must be ready. They must be able to psychologically accept it, but at the same time, there are other underlying issues that go on with many individuals. As you know, people have situations going on at home, or they have underlying mental health issues, or they are facing an addiction problem. Anything along those lines that would impair them to not be psychologically capable of accepting coaching. Do not take on the role as a therapist. That's not your role. You're a manager. You are their supervisor. That is your role. You are there to assist them in their career development, but you are not there to fix their personal lives. The next component is that the individual must be willing. They must be open to the process, interested in actually committing change, and then motivated to improve their performance. If you have an individual that just is very lackadaisical and is not at all concerned with their work performance, they're not going to be an ideal recipient of effective coaching because they are not interested in it. Another one is that the person must be able. They must be capable of changing performance and having the right aptitude and attitude. If an individual, isn't ready or willing to receive this, or they're not able to go about implementing the coaching that you have given them, they're not going to be ready and they're not going to be ideal people to receive this coaching. They're just, if they don't fit any of these criteria, or ideally all three of them, they're not going to be able to effectively receive your coaching. And then you went through an absurd amount of time trying to help them, but in all reality, they're not going to change and they're not going to try and improve their career performance. The next one is discipline. This can be very challenging. It is defined as calling an employee's attention to inappropriate behavior and also advising them how to correct the behavior. Discipline isn't just, reprimanding somebody because they have performed a behavior that was inappropriate. It's also trying to help that person to improve themselves in the future and to not continue that behavior. It is dictated by organizational policies, so we do need to follow policies and protocols based upon wherever the establishment is based. One component that's very important is progressive discipline. It is the formal process of increasingly severe warnings for repeated violations, which we'll get into more a little bit later. And then non-punitive discipline by Campbell, Fleming, and Grote, they discussed that consistent discipline for behaviors and making sure that the employee does not feel as though they are being punished, and also creating an action plan with them for the future, has had astronomical benefits. It decreased absenteeism, it improved the work environment, and it overall made the employees much happier to work there. So by disciplining your employees, but not in such a way that they feel as though that they are being, receiving punitive punishment or being punished, then you're actually fostering a better environment for them. But one of the key components is that you need to be open with that individual. They need to be agreeable to creating an action plan for the future. It is a very, very interpersonal relationship, and it's very interactive between the two of them, which also relates with coaching in that definition. However, you need to be able to connect with this individual and try to help them and create this action plan so that they aren't doing this behavior in the future, because ultimately there is a reason that people are behaving inappropriately. So progressive discipline is a different, it's like a lineation of steps in which people take throughout the active discipline. And we begin with a verbal warning, and then we progress to a written warning. So with the progression of discipline, you want to understand before you progress, you need to ask yourself these 4 questions to ensure that that person is not going to retaliate or feel attacked, and that this is appropriate discipline for the individual to receive. First question is, what is the nature and seriousness of this behavior? If they've been calling out or excessively or becoming a no-call, no-show, why? What is the nature of this? Is it very serious? Are we impairing patient care? Yes. Or is it something very simple or minor and it's not actually that serious? Next question is, when, where, and how many times has this occurred? Has this individual continued to call out multiple times? Have they been doing this, over a couple months, over a couple years? Next question is, what is the previous work history? Have they done this before? Is this part of their, track record with different employers that they've gone throughout the years? Is this a pattern that we're picking up on? Are there any complicating factors to consider? Is the patient a drug user or have mental health issues? Well, it's going to be a little bit more challenging to effectively discipline them in such a way that they aren't feeling attacked. And it's very important because we also want to be aware of ourselves and that we are not judging these people based upon these situations that they're experiencing. And here are the formal steps that I briefly, defined earlier. So we have the verbal warning, which is a repeated unacceptable or serious behavior warning. So even though it is an oral warning, the employee should receive paper documentation, and there should also be a copy that goes into that individual's file, just so that it is documented that you did have this verbal discussion with them. But it doesn't need to be a very serious conversation or a written, form. However, when we get onto written warnings, if the individual has exhausted verbal warnings, or they're now exhibiting serious unacceptable behaviors. For example, if the person has called out 5 times in 3 months, they can receive a written warning, depending on, your policies and protocols based on your establishment. Or if the individual is now all of a sudden falling asleep at work and placing patients in danger, then that would be a serious unacceptable behavior, and they will bypass a verbal warning. And then ultimately, this will end in termination if the behaviors continue and we're not able to come to a conclusion as to why this behavior is happening and help them. So next is termination. This will be the final step in progressive discipline. One of the most important things to take away from termination is documentation. There needs to be clear documentation from the get-go if this has been a long-standing situation, or, what happened that all of a sudden we now want to fire this employee. It needs to be very clear. It needs to be something that can be pulled back upon, because in the event that an employee would sue, we need to be able to validate ourselves. And we also need to make sure that our supervisors are aware of this and behind us so that they can support us in this process. We also need to remain very firm but very compassionate. This is not a pleasant experience for either end here. And we need to be firm because obviously, this is a very unfortunate situation, but we do need to be compassionate because that other person, regardless of what they did, is a person too. And we need to be able to connect with them on a human level. In accordance with documentation, this is part of the employee's permanent record. So we need to have careful conduction of the termination. It needs to be without emotion, but again, compassionate and kind, And then according to hospital policy, it all depends on what our policies and protocols are based upon, depending on the organization. So here we have some steps here for preparing for termination. You review your employee's file, make sure that all the documentation has been collected for whatever behaviors were performed. Do we give employees feedback on a regular basis? If not, that might not be very helpful to us. So we need to be prepared. And then, are you consistent with application of performance standards with all employees? This feeds back to discipline. If an individual calls off for an event and we find out that they are going to this event, and we, provide them with discipline, then we need to enact the same discipline, the same level throughout all individuals that perform that behavior. If Susie calls off to a rock concert on Saturday and we discipline her, and Amanda calls off to go to a pop concert on Friday, the next week we need to discipline them the exact same. And then, did you offer remediation or coaching? That needs to be provided and reviewed before your termination so that we know if we were able to effectively provide coaching and if we did take the time to discuss these issues with the employee. Then we need to also be prepared for how might the employee challenge the termination. If they have any characteristics that are protected, such as, disability or race, or, have they experienced any situations previously in which they might retaliate? We need to be prepared for that, and we need to have our supervisor behind us so that we can be prepared to have this discussion with the employee and prevent any retaliation. And like I've mentioned a couple times, we need to make sure our supervisor is aware and behind our decision. Terminating is not a very pleasant experience, but we need to make sure that all of our leading individuals are behind us and think that this is a very well supported decision. These are the termination rights and wrongs. We do want to offer outplacement services, financial transition planning, and upfront compensation in order to assist them during their time. Wrongs would be communicating decisions inaccurately, again, firm but compassionate. We need to consult with an attorney in advance, if there is any indication that they may retaliate. We need to consider those protected characteristics that might also cause them to retaliate. And we need to retrieve company property right as soon as that interview ends. We need to retrieve their badges, anything that they may own that is associated or allows them access to our facilities. Here I have a video attached on coaching skills that I will provide the link to when I post this so that we have it, because I realize that we cannot access links from a moving PowerPoint. So it is a great 2-minute video. It discusses effective coaching skills. I really enjoyed it. And then this one is termination tips and how to effectively terminate an employee. Just some additional information to wrap this all up. All of these that we've discussed today, coaching, discipline, and termination, are necessary components of a very effective manager. They are all unfortunately required, unfortunate as to termination, but they all will improve, workplace outcomes and productivity. We need to be providing consistent discipline. It does yield successful results. The non-punitive discipline I discussed earlier. There was the study, the survey that they conducted after implementing this. They had not only 98 out of 100 managers say that they did not approve of the program. 98 out of 100. Obviously, they're doing something right, and this is very effective because employees were regulating their behaviors and the workplace was improving. And again, like I've mentioned over and over, terminate with compassion. We need to be kind, thorough, and yet firm. We want to be very firm in our decisions. However, we do want to be compassionate as a human. And here we are. Thank you guys for listening to my presentation, and I look forward to reading all of yours.